Hello everybody, it's Foo here, and today I want to talk to you about one of the coolest Pokemon introduced in Sword and Shield, Arctozolt. I'm super excited to talk about it because Arctozolt has had one of the weirdest journeys in competitive Pokemon, moving up and down Smogon tiers so unpredictably it makes NFTs look stable. I can't think of any other Pokemon that has had to be banned 3 times in one generation. So this Pokemon is very interesting, and I can't wait to get into that rocky ride with you. But first, some basics about Arctozolt. It's one of the 4 fossil Pokemon that are Karalis's victims in Sword and Shield, but we should be grateful for her incompetence because Arctozolt is pretty unique. Obvious from its name, it's an Ice-Electric type, and this typing is only shared with one other Pokemon, which is Rotom Frost. And it's pretty great typing. For many generations, Ice-Electric has been considered one of the best offensive pairings, considering no single type resists both of these types, and only a handful of dual type Pokemon can actually resist both Ice and Electric. So Arctozolt already has that going for it. Comparing its stats to the other 3 fossil Pokemon, we can see that its attack stat is pretty high, its special attack stat is pretty high as well compared to the others. It's got all around decent bulk, all of the fossil Pokemon kind of do because they've got that nice 90 HP stat. And it's got a relatively slow base 55 speed, which is actually pretty painful considering the fossil Pokemon's signature move. They either get Fishious Rend or, in Arctozolt's case, Volt Beat. This is a base 85 power electric type move that doubles in power if you move first, which is crazy. That is such a nuke. The issue is, with Arctozolt's base 55 speed stat, it's going to be relatively rare that you outspeed Pokemon. That's pretty slow, and it's probably the main drawback for Arctozolt. Its other coverage moves are pretty good. As we've said, Electric and Ice go really well together anyway, so you don't actually need much other coverage. But Low Kick is a pretty nice fighting type move to catch some rock types and steel types. And it also has some water coverage like Hydro Pump and Surf, which is particularly useful for Pokemon like Rotom Heat that would otherwise resist your dual stab combo. In terms of abilities, when this Pokemon was first introduced, it had the Static or the Volt Switch ability. Static's not so helpful for a more offensive Pokemon since you don't really want to be taking attacks. So Volt Switch was always the preferred option, giving you an extra immunity, and being able to block opponents' Volt Switches can be very helpful. So where does that leave Arctozolt? Well, it was definitely more of an offensive Pokemon simply for the fact that it has Volt Beat. Decent physical electric type moves are like Goldust, they're super rare, and this is probably the best one in the game. So it's definitely going to be Arctozolt's biggest selling point. Combined with its amazing Ice type coverage in moves like Blizzard, Freeze Dry, Icicle Spear, and Icicle Crash, this Pokemon could potentially have very few switches. The issue is, you need to force the Pokemon out to begin with, and if you're not faster than them, that's not going to happen. So the speed really was the biggest drawback for Arctozolt. In the early days of Sword and Shield, a number of different sets were tried out. Choice Scarf maybe seemed the most obvious because it just boosted Arctozolt's speed, allowing your Bolt Beaks to more likely get that double power. However, Life Orb or Choice Band sets could be tried as well, it's just that their success was a bit more limited because you wouldn't outspeed so many Pokemon. It's also important to note the direct competition that Dracozolt gave Arctozolt. With its higher speed stat, it more reliably got full power Bolt Beaks off, and its Hustle ability gave it a 50% power boost, meaning that Choice Scarf Dracozolt was much more powerful than Arctozolt. Despite not having the desirable ice coverage, it did have decent coverage options anyway, so Dracozolt saw a lot more usage initially than Arctozolt. In terms of Smogon tiering, this Pokemon premiered in the NU tier, the never used tier, so that's below overused, underused, and rarely used. So it's the 4th tier. It's not particularly good, that's pretty low. And actually, it only stayed there very briefly before dropping even further to PU, the tier below NU, so that's really not great for Arctozolt. But by the time it dropped all the way down to PU, this tier actually suited it pretty darn well because all the better and faster Pokemon were tied up in the higher tiers. So down here, most of your walls would be much slower than Arctozolt, and you would be getting those very powerful Bolt Beaks off. In fact, Arctozolt was considered such a threat in this very low tier that it was banned very quickly, giving Arctozolt its first ban of this generation, albeit not a particularly impressive one because it's an extremely low Smogon tier. Arctozolt could still be used in all the tiers above PU, so that's overused, underused, rarely used, and never used, but it really didn't see much usage, as we've said before, because of that speed stat. And for that reason, Arctozolt didn't see much competitive play throughout 2020. Fast forward to November 2020 and the Crown Tundra DLC was released, and this was a game changer. New Pokemon were released, old Pokemon were reintroduced to Sword and Shield, but most notably for Arctozolt, it got access to its hidden ability thanks to one Dynamax den found in the Crown Tundra. Here you could catch an Arctozolt with the Slush Rush ability. Slush Rush doubles Arctozolt's speed in Hail, and that patches up Arctozolt's biggest weakness. This was so huge for Arctozolt, it can't be understated. In a very short amount of time, Arctozolt became a staple on Hail teams, outspeeding pretty much every Pokemon while it was in Hail, and firing off those extremely powerful Bolt Beaks. If any ground types try to switch in, you then have 100% accurate blizzards to blast them with. And considering that most ground types have a higher defense stat than special defense stat, these blizzards would absolutely destroy them. So Arctozolt had very, very few switch-ins on Hail teams, and it had finally found its place in the meta. From being PU in usage, this Pokemon leapfrogged NU to go straight to RU by usage, and here it was seen on a number of Hail teams. However, its time in RU was short-lived. It did once again drop down to NU. Bear in mind that this time post-DLC was relatively chaotic due to the amount of new Pokemon introduced into the game. So people in RU were trying lots of things, and Arctozolt apparently just wasn't one of those things. It's also noteworthy that Alolan Ninetales rose to UU during this time, and Alolan Ninetales is by far the best Hail setter simply because it's the fastest one by quite a stretch. So it's able to more reliably set up your Aurora Veils, and it's just a pretty decent Pokemon. So not having that Pokemon in RU anymore to set up Hail made Hail teams slightly less attractive. When Arctozolt hit NU, however, there was a lot of conversation in the NU tier, and Arctozolt was quickly banned. So this is the second ban for Arctozolt. It was banned from PU, and then it got Slush Rush, and it was banned from NU, which is pretty impressive. This ban wasn't going to last very long though, because NU was struggling with a number of other things related to Hail, including Aurora Veil, which made offensive teams just incredibly hard to deal with. You could set up pretty easily and sweep the opponent. And also, Arctovish seemed like a very tempting prospect because this Pokemon also had got access to Slush Rush, and its Fishious Rend was extremely powerful. So if you can't use Arctozolt on your Hail team, why not just use Arctovish? Smogon tried to only ban Pokemon where possible, and these are called simple bans. And in this instance, they decided to ban Snow Warning. Following this decision, they could then unban Arctozolt and Aurora Veil, because without Snow Warning, Hail teams were much less powerful. You have to manually set up Hail, which takes a lot of setup, a lot of support, and they're just not quite as viable. This ban was actually a simple solution to these problems. It meant that Arctozolt doesn't have to be banned, it meant that Aurora Veil didn't have to be banned, and it meant Arctovish didn't have to be banned either. The issue is, without Snow Warning, all these Pokemon were, again, a lot less viable. They still had Slush Rush, so it meant that you could manually set up Hail with Arctozolt, and then try to sweep plate game, for example, but you didn't have that consistent just switch a Pokemon in with Snow Warning, and then you've got your Hail again, and you can try to do massive wall-breaking damage with Arctozolt whenever you wanted. It wasn't that simple anymore. For these reasons, Arctozolt dropped down to PU again. And interestingly, because of the tier changes within PU, Arctozolt wasn't immediately considered too strong anymore, despite it having access to Slush Rush, which couldn't be activated so easily, but it's definitely still a buff. PU tier could more easily deal with an Arctozolt than it could before the Crown Tundra DLC, so this Pokemon wasn't actually considered for a ban in PU. In fact, Arctozolt's usage continued to drop. At one point, if it was used on less than 2.28% of PU teams, it would drop down to the lower tier, and its usage was 2.3%. It was like 0.02% of dropping down another tier. Meanwhile, in the higher tiers where Snow Warning is allowed, this Pokemon is performing extremely well, particularly in UU, where you can use that Alolan Ninetales to set up your Hail. In the tournament scene, this Pokemon was wreaking havoc and getting tournament wins, so it really was being noticed, especially in that UU tier. Even in OU, it was considered very viable. In Hail teams, it had a viability ranking of A, which is extremely high. Like, that's a really, really good ranking in the highest Smogon tier. So it's a pretty weird dichotomy having Arctozolt being very viable in the highest Smogon tier while teetering on the edge of the lowest Smogon tier as precariously as the drip on the end of its nose. I quite like this duality for Arctozolt. I think it's pretty poetic for a Pokemon made up of two separate dinosaurs to have such different competitive viability in different tiers, simply because Snow Warning was banned in the lowest tiers. What comes next was pretty awesome because Arctozolt actually got banned in the UU tier. Just before it was going to drop to the lowest Smogon tier, it was banned in the second highest Smogon tier because of its impact on Hail teams. That is the third ban for Arctozolt, and now it's only available in the OU tier, where it remains to have an A- viability ranking. I think that journey for Arctozolt is super interesting. It's always been a controversial Pokemon, whether that's in the extremely low Smogon tiers or whether that's all the way up to UU tournaments, which are super competitive. It seems this Pokemon has been frequently overlooked, and despite its A- viability ranking in OU, it probably is still underused and underrepresented because it's built around that niche Hail team. But I just think it's a really interesting case study on the Generation 8 competitive scene. I haven't talked much about VGC, and that's really because this Pokemon hasn't seen so much usage there. Considering speed control is so crucial in this format, even with Slush Rush activated, if it gets one single speed drop, Arctozolt is not going to outspeed your opponent's team, or if the opponent sets up Tailwind, again, they will outspeed you, you won't outspeed them. So Arctozolt really struggles a lot more in this format, especially because it has a number of awkward weaknesses due to its ice typing, and Bolt Beak is only a single target move, so you can maybe take out one of your opponent's Pokemon if you're lucky, but then they can still attack you with the other, which could really threaten Arctozolt. So generally, Arctozolt hasn't seen so much usage here, but you could still try to use it with Alolan Ninetales. Having that Blizzard, having that Bolt Beak is still very good in the doubles meta. Obviously Blizzard hits both opponents, so you could definitely try this. Anyways, I think I'll leave this analysis there, but I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts about Arctozolt in the comment section below. And please let me know if you can think of a Pokemon that has had a wilder ride through different Smogon tiers in one generation. I couldn't really think of one. This has been pretty crazy for Arctozolt. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe for more content. Ding the notification bell because I don't have a super regular video upload schedule, so if you don't want to miss a video, make sure that you get notifications. And follow me over on Twitter at SJA900. All that's left to be said is I've been Foo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.